Hey everybody, Jeffrey Way here with JavaScript from Null Chapter 4. So in this lesson, we're going to continue learning about arrays and some of the methods of the array object. We're going to take another look at functions, take things a step further and learn about returning values from a function. We're going to learn a little bit about scope. And then finally, as I told you in the last lesson, you'll learn how to create your first animation, which is just simulating the fading of a element. So lots of cool stuff we're going to learn today. So let's get started. I have created a new folder called Chapter 4, and I've created an index.html file, and we're all set to get started. So the first thing we're going to do is just before our closing body tag, let's open script tags, and we're going to create a new array. We're going to use the literal syntax, so we'll do var arr. It can be anything we want, and it's going to be equal to an array. So we could do the new array where we actually create a new instance of that object, or we can use brackets and just paste it in. So we'll do something just kind of generic, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we want to figure out what the values are, we can do console.log array. And I'm going to go ahead and view this in the browser, refresh, and we get 1, 2, 3, and 4, an array of data. So for instance, if you want to only display one of those values as you learned in the previous lesson, you can just do that in brackets. If I refresh the page now, you're going to get 2, and that's because it's 0 base. So this would be the first one, this would be the second one. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So we change that to 3, of course, it's going to display 4. Okay, so now I'm going to show you about some of the methods you'll find yourself using a lot, and they are push, pop, unshift, and shift. So they're a bit strangely named, so let's just go through each one. The push method of the array object will add something to the end. So if you want to continue with your array, maybe you're using a for statement, and every time you go through the for statement, maybe you add a value to an array or something like that. How could you do it? You use push, so we could do array.push, and we can just add a value here. So we can do 5, and that's going to literally push a new value to the end of the array. And if I come back and refresh the page now, and of course we need the console.log array, we're going to get 5, and that's been added. Okay, so that's push. The names are a little hard to memorize, so the best advice is just memorize them. Just do it once, spend a few minutes, and just get those into your head. That way you don't have to keep coming back to it. The next one is going to be pop. So pop will remove from the end. So if we do array.pop, that's going to take the very most recent item and pop. Think of it as just blows up. It gets rid of it. So now when we refresh the page, it's going to show 1, 2, and 3. There you go. So I'm going to comment this out just so when you download the source code, removes from end. The next one we're going to look at is unshift. So these are kind of weirdly named, but unshift will add to the beginning. So think of it as the opposite of push. So if we do array.unshift 0, now, as you would expect, 0 is going to be at the very beginning. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and of course at the opposite of unshift is going to be shift, and that will remove from the beginning. So array.shift, and now it gets rid of the first one, which was equal to 1. Okay. Removes from beginning. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to show you with arrays, because you'll find yourself using that quite a bit. So the next thing that we're going to move on to is functions. So let's go ahead and create a function called myfunc, and we'll just do some kind of basic math operation like var sum is equal to 5 plus 10. Okay, so of course if we alert sum, you got to remember we've created a function but we haven't called it yet, so let's make sure we do that right now. Myfunc, refresh the page, and we of course get 15. Okay, but what if you want to continue working with that value? Maybe you don't want to alert it out, you want to trap that value and store it into a variable. How could you do it? Okay, well, we could do something like, let's get rid of the alert, and we could do var num is going to be equal to myfunc. We can make that equal to the product of a function. But then if we alert num, you're going to get something and it's going to say undefined. So I refresh the page and it comes back with undefined. How come? Well, think of it this way. We created a variable and we made it equal to this function. So this function ran. We created a variable, a local variable. We'll get into that a bit more. It's called scope. And we made the variable equal to 5 plus 10 equals 15. And then the function ended and we never did anything. So nothing was ever actually transferred to this variable. So how can we take this value of sum and bring it back and store it into this new variable? And this is going to be using return. So we're going to return sum. And that's going to take this value, return it from the function, and it's going to store it into this num variable. And now if I refresh the page, we do get 15, and it's because we actually pulled something out of the function. Okay. Now the next thing we're gonna look at is scope. So I want to show you something right here. Let's go ahead and just get rid of this completely. Let's do sum alert sum, and we're also going to alert it from the function. So we'll do alert within just for outside. Okay, and we need to make sure, of course, that we call our function, myfunc. Okay, so let's see what happens. Refresh the page. Within, the value is equal to 15. Alert within sum is 15. And it should say it outside of it as well, correct? No, sum is not defined. How come? Well, we know we created this variable called sum, so how come it's not working? And the reason it's returning or displaying undefined is because of scope. So what is scope? Scope is a way to, it's kind of a way for garbage collection. So any variable that you create within a function is going to be exclusive to that function. So if we created it in here, it'll be available throughout this entire function until the function concludes. But then anywhere outside of it, that variable is not going to be available to you. So what's the reason for this? Performance benefits mostly. If you have tons, imagine you have a project with like 50 different functions and you're creating variables throughout all of them. Imagine if all of them were global variables, meaning variables that are available throughout your entire project. Imagine how many times you could overwrite the values of variables just because you forgot a name, or maybe you're using somebody else's application and you don't know a variable they created, so you create a new one innocently and you don't realize that you just have overwritten some variable that was created earlier. And this is the reason for scope. That way you don't have to worry about it. There are also some performance benefits, like when the function terminates, any resources are freed up. And this is called garbage collection. We're going to go into that a little bit more in future tutorials as we get a bit more advanced. Okay, so how could is there a way to take this variable right here and say, no, I actually want this to be a global variable, not a local one? Yes, there is a way if you feel the need to do it. And it's removing the var keyword. So that'll still create the variable, but this time it'll create it as a global variable, once again meaning that's available to you throughout the entire project. Refresh the page, we get 15 from within the function, and now outside of the function we get 15. Okay, and that's how we did it. So now sum is available to us. With that said, you don't want to have too many variables all over the place. If you can make a variable exclusively local, you definitely want to do that. Now, let's say throughout your application, there's definitely going to be times when you need variables and values that are available throughout the whole project. So imagine something like, let's scroll down, and you have var1 equals something, and var2 equals something else, and var another equals something more equals something else. You can immediately see you have all these variables, and you could have tons and tons. So here you have consider like footprints. You have 4 footprints in your project. Now, there are ways that you can actually take this and bring it down to one global footprint. And we haven't gone into it yet, and we're not going to go fully into it yet, but it's by using an object. And to give you a quick overview of it, you'd create a variable and be var my object, or anything you want to call it. And we're going to use the literal form for an object, which is just like creating the opening and closing brackets of a function. But now, we can create our value. So we can do var1, and rather than doing the equal sign, we do colon. So that would be that, something. And then you separate each value. Instead of doing a semicolon, you use a comma. So we could do var2. Whoops. var2 is going to be equal to something else. And another is going to be equal to something. And you can even have them equal to functions. So if var_more was equal to some kind of function, like alert, hello from the function, then you could do another is going to be equal to more. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. Another would be equal to function, like here. Alert, hello from the function. Okay, so now how could you gain access to these values? We could just do alert my object, and then we use, this is kind of a way to create object-oriented, almost like classes, but not quite. They're actually objects. So we do my obj dot var1, and let's see what that returns. Something, okay? So I'm going to go back to our project and make sure we get rid of these extra alerts. And now you can see, all right, what is the advantage to this again? Here, the way we did it the old way, and we'll do old way, is we created 4 variables, 4 global footprints. Here, we've created 1. And now all of these are available to, almost think of it as like a namespace. These are now available to you just from this single global variable. So if we want to do another one, we could do var2, and now that's going to display something else. And if we do the third one, another, because this is a function, we need to make sure we append the open and close parentheses, which kind of signifies execute. Hello from the function. Okay, pretty cool, huh? Okay, so we're doing a lot today, just kind of refining the fundamentals, the basics, before we kind of move on to actual projects. And the first project, we talked about this last week, and many of you said you did want to learn it, was I made reference to at the beginning of this that many of you, or many people, are so reliant upon JavaScript libraries that they haven't learned even simple things like, do you know how to fade out a div using JavaScript? Okay, so let's create a new page. And file, new file. Actually, let's just write over this. And let's create a div. And we'll do div, style. Let's give it an ID as well. ID equals box. And style is going to be width, 200. These are mostly arbitrary values. Background, red. Let's preview that and bring the preview out. And now we get our box as we would expect. Okay, so how could we fade this out? Well, traditionally with jQuery, it's or any other library for that matter, it's super simple. You would just do get box, fade out. Refresh the page. Whoops, box. Refresh the page, and it immediately fades out. That's what's so amazing about libraries. But do you know how to do it with just pure, raw JavaScript? We're going to learn that. So you're going to learn a new method called setInterval. So what does setInterval do? SetInterval. It accepts a function, and it accepts a speed. So function, speed. Okay, what does this do? SetInterval will run as many times as you tell it to. So if we set an interval of maybe an alert, and we set the speed to 1000 in milliseconds, that actually comes to 1 second. That means every second this function will run. Okay, and that's what we want to do here, is we want to slowly fade out this box. So we'll do function. And we're going to use an anonymous function. And if we haven't gone over this yet, an anonymous function is just an unnamed function. So we'll do function. and then a comma and the speed. And then we close our opening parentheses and close the statement with a semicolon. So to give you an example, if we just alert, hi, every second this is going to alert. And there you see, every single second it does a new one. Okay, so now you know the basic functionality. What we're going to do here is every time this function is called, we're going to take the opacity of the div and fade it out by just kind of a minuscule number, like 0.02, something like that. So first we have to find our box. So for those of you, many of you had asked me to kind of do more comparisons to jQuery, and I'm happy to do that a little bit. If you would do jQuery box to grab the value of a box right up here, here we would do var box equals document.get element by ID, and we do box. Okay, so now we have stored this div within a box. So now if we want to change it, we could just do box style, and this will give us access to a lot of the CSS properties that you're familiar with, opacity, and we want to take its current value and diminish it by maybe something like 0.02. So minus equals, you remember that. That means its value minus 0.02. Okay, so that's not going to be enough right now. So if I come back and refresh the page, it just disappears completely. So how come? Well, first, let's go ahead and explicitly state the opacity. That's going to start, but we have this running every second. So every second, the opacity is going to go down by 0.02. That's nothing. Why don't we change it to something like, I don't know, 20 milliseconds. Refresh the page, and now you can see it faded out. So let's kind of go over exactly what happened. Every 20 milliseconds, which is extremely quick, you know, that's like fractions of a second, this function runs. Well, you're going to have your first lesson in best practices. Does it make sense for every 20 milliseconds to create a variable, traverse the DOM, find the element with an ID of box, and store it in this variable? Is there a reason to do that every 20 milliseconds? No, it's going to be the same value every time, so why would we store it within this function? Would it not make more sense to take it, pull it out, and store it outside of it? So now the benefit is we only create this variable one time rather than, 50 times a second or 100 times a second. It makes much more sense, and it's going to be a lot quicker because this is a global variable, we will still have access to it from the function. As you'll see, if I come back and refresh the page, it'll still work, but it's going to be quicker. Okay, your first lesson in best practices. Okay, so how can we make this better? Well, what if we wanted to create a function whose sole purpose was to fade out an element? How could we do that? Okay, well, we could do function, and let's give the name of something easy to understand, like fade out. So, if we just called it like so, fade out, it'll work. And it fades out. But it's still not that flexible, because what if we have, for instance, another value, another box, and let's just change this background to green. What if we had another box and instead we wanted to fade that one out? Wouldn't it be nice if we could, when we call our function fade out, we could actually specify what we're fading out, like new box, something like that. And we can do that. So let's create another one right here, var new box. These aren't very good names, by the way, but it's just for the example. And this time we're going to get the another box by ID. Okay. So we've created a new function, and now we want to pass in a value to it. So let's make sure that it accepts it. So we'll accept something general. We remember you don't want to call it box or anything like that, because what if you're passing in maybe an unordered list or an image or something? And so why don't we do something generic like ELEM representing element? Okay. So let's see how we can replace it. We don't want any, think of when you're creating functions, try to get rid of all of these specifics. That's the best advice I can offer. No specifics in functions that are going to be reused. So here, you see this box that is referring specifically to an element, and that reduces the ability to reuse it. We're going to replace it now with elem. And now we call fade out, we pass in this new box or this element right here. Then the function is called, it accepts that element, then it calls that element.style.opacity, and let's see if this works. Aha, now we did that one. So let's see how we have more flexibility. Now let's pass in the first one again, or the red one. And there you go. So you see how it's much more flexible. Okay, so can we expand this more? Well, what if you wanted to fade it out over, I don't know, 5 seconds or something like that? Right now, we're pretty much just, you don't even know how fast this is fading out. So what could we do here? Well, let's allow, once again, I want to be able to specify fade out over 5 seconds. And notice I created this comment. There's nothing created just yet. I'm deciding that right now that I'm going to add a second parameter, okay, 5 seconds. Well, we need to make sure if we pass it in that the function accepts it. So I'm going to do comma, and now it's going to accept, it can be anything we call. We can call it S for speed or I don't know, anything. So now we know this is 20 milliseconds. It's running every 20 milliseconds, so we could replace this with speed. And you might think at first, oh, that's going to work. Well, it's not. But let's see why it's not going to work first. And just for the sake of expediency, let's change it to 1 second. So technically, if we're doing this correctly, we want the box to fade out in 1 second. Let's see if we got it right. No, we didn't. So you could open up the console and see, is anything going on? And no, nothing's wrong, but it's not fading out. So what is the problem? Well, the problem is you want the entire thing to be gone in a second. But here, we've only changed the interval to that speed. So actually, this function is now running every second. So every second, the opacity is going down by 0.02. And if you come back here, you can see it is fading out, but very slowly. So we have to do a quick bit of math. We know that we are reducing the opacity by 0.02 or 1/50th of its original value. 1 divided by 50 equals 0.02. So if we know it's going down 1/50th at a time, we can divide the speed they pass in by 50, and that will equal the number of times it needs to run total. Hopefully that makes sense. And now if I refresh the page, you'll see over the course of 1 second, fades out. Let's just check this. Let's change it to 5 seconds and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now it's gone. Okay, so now we have created a flexible function that will fade it out, and you can add that to your to your list of functions. Maybe you can create a functions file that you can come back for reference, and we will continue to improve this. So the last thing we're going to go over with this function is, what if the user has not set an opacity? Refresh the page, nothing is going to happen. Whoops, let's go ahead and get rid of that one. You see, it just immediately gets rid of. It just disappears. So how can we do that? The reason is because we're reducing the opacity by 0.02, but if we were to alert it, console.log lm.style.opacity, you're going to get nothing. Refresh the page, and let's do it at the very beginning. Clear that and refresh the page, and you can see it up there. There's a line, meaning it's not set to anything at that point. So how can we fix this? Well, why don't we go ahead and find out if there's an opacity, and if there's not anything set, let's go ahead and set it for them. So we could do if lm.style, and by the way, there are other ways to do this that we will go look into in future lessons. So if there is an opacity, then we don't really need to do anything. We only need to do something if no opacity is set. So the way we can do that is by adding an exclamation point, and this negates it. So we're basically saying if there is no opacity, or if there is no value set, if it's undefined, then let's go ahead and set a value like lm.style.opacity is equal to 1. Refresh the page. And now you can see over 5 seconds it's working. And it's because it looked for it, it realized there was no opacity actually set yet, so we set it to 1, and now we set our interval, which ran 50 times, and we reduced the opacity by 0.02. Okay, and now we have a flexible function. So why don't we create an image? Let's go to last thing just to see what we have here. And I'm just going to copy this image location. Don't do this, please, but for our example, it'll work. Image source, some image, and let's see if we can fade out that image. So ID equals my image, and we're going to do another one, var img equals document.get element by ID, my image, and now we're going to fade out img. Over, and this time we'll do it over about 2.5 seconds. Refresh, and now you can see we had an image and it completely faded out over the course of 2.5 seconds. Flexible functions. Okay, so this is going to be the last of our basics. We're going to take a look at events in the next chapter, and you're going to learn some of the issues with working from browser to browser. For instance, if you want to add a click event, something simple where maybe if we click on one of these boxes, an alert display shows. Believe it or not, it's a little more difficult than you would think because of the way different browsers interpret it. So, for instance, with modern browsers like Firefox and Safari, we have a method called add event listener available to us. Well, of course, Internet Explorer doesn't feel the need to embrace that. They use their own technology, which is called attach event. So if we do add event listener and we show an alert, it's only going to work in Firefox and modern browsers. Internet Explorer just will throw an error because it doesn't even know what add event listener is equal to. It wants to receive attach event. So we'd have to listen if add event listener does not exist, then we know we're working with a new version of Explorer, in which case we use the attach event method. So if that seems a little high level, don't worry, I'll explain it to you as best as possible, and that's going to be in the next lesson when we learn about events. I will see you guys later. My name is Jeffrey Way, and always stay tuned to net.tutsplus.com for the best tips and tutorials on the internet. Bye.